everyone, and welcome back to session 3 from our lunch break. I hope you all enjoyed a nice relaxing time for your lunch break. Before we proceed with the next session, just tracking back a little bit, we did get a question just before lunch from someone who asked about raising your hand to ask a question through one of the sessions. So just recapping on how you do that, to raise your hand in the Zoom function, press Alt-Y on your computer. That's Alt, then the Y button on your computer. And on a phone, you press the star key and then the number 9. So that will bring up the raise your hand function, and then we can ask you what your question is. So I hope that's helpful. So our next presenter for this afternoon is JobAccess. And JobAccess are the national hub for workplace and employment information for people with disability, employers and service providers. And JobAccess will provide information about what financial support is available to employers, as well as what other non-financial resources and services are available to help you employ people with disability. So I'd really like to hand over to Daniel Riedl, the General Manager of JobAccess, for him to take us through his presentation. Thank you. Daniel, over to you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for pronouncing my surname correctly. That was very good.
Thank you. I'm hugely relieved about that.
Welcome, everybody, and thank you to Blind Citizens Australia for inviting me and for inviting JobAccess to the BCA Employment Forum and deliver this presentation today. Bujirikemoto means hello in the Riedl language, the traditional custodians of the land on which the CBD is built. I want to pay my respects to the traditional custodians of the land I am on today, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and as well as we are attending for multiple regions, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners throughout Australia and recognize their continuing connection to land, waters and culture. I also pay respect to elders past, present and emerging. We really need their knowledge now. We've seen fires, we've seen floods continuously, and the custodianship of these beautiful countries is now more important than ever. My name is Daniel Riedl, and I'm the General Manager of JobAccess. And again, thank you everyone that has joined in today. So let's start by discussing the fact that various studies highlight the benefits of employing people with disability. Yes, they're twice as likely to be unemployed and stay out of employment for at least 1 year compared to their peers without a disability. So employers play a real vital role in closing this employment gap by hiring, supporting and retaining people with disabilities more broadly within your organization. And today we will discuss the range of services employers can access and no cost at all to support people with blindness or low vision. So what will be covered today? Today, we will cover the range of free support and service available through JobAccess. What are workplace modifications and adjustments? So we're all talking in the same page. How to access funding for adjustments throughout JobAccess and Employment Assistance Fund. And we will also talk about how JobAccess can help employers gain confidence in recruiting and retaining people with blindness or low vision. And then we'll open to the floor for any questions from the audience. Now, my colleague is also in this meeting, Daraj. He will be answering some of those questions that get pop up also in the chat. But I also put at the very end the number, our information center, where you can just call and talk to any of our professional advisors for information, advice in terms of modifications, adjustments, or general information around disability employment. And let's start by looking at what we do at JobAccess. And this is what I get to brag about, this wonderful service. JobAccess is the national hub for disability employment for people with disabilities, employers, and service providers. It is a free service to help remove barriers to disability employment. As I said, we've got a range of services available, which includes a dedicated advice service via phone and websites. We operate a national call center, and the number is just on your screen now. And it's delivered by a team frontline of professionals who provide free, confidential, and expert advice. Our advisors are available to answer your questions of matter related to disability employment, or can direct you to other services as well. JobAccess has also a comprehensive website at jobaccess.gov.au with information, advice, and information on disability employment. I really encourage you to go and look at that website. There is a toolkit as well in there, which is fantastic for all employers at all levels of confidence in disability employment. We also coordinate workplace modifications and adjustments through the Employment Assistance Fund, or EAF. And we will talk a little bit more in detail about this later in the session. We also have the National Disability Recruitment Coordinator, which is the employer engagement service of JobAccess, which works with large employers across Australia to increase disability confidence. Later in the presentation, I will also discuss how employers can engage with the NDRC. The Complaint Resolution and Referral Service, which aims to improve disability employment government-funded support services through a fair and impartial complaint resolution process. And also the National Disability Abuse and Neglect Hotline, or the Hotline, which is a vital reporting service available for anyone who suspects abuse and neglect of a person with a disability. Now, some of you also may be aware that what workplace modifications are. However, for the benefits of all of our attendees today, let me start by defining the term. So workplace adjustments are reasonable adjustments, are administrative, environmental, or procedural changes that enable people with disabilities to have an equitable employment opportunity and work effectively and comfortably. Now, obviously, not all people with disabilities will require workplace adjustments. However, knowing how to provide adjustments can help employers attract and employ people from a much wider talent pool. Last year, JobAccess undertook a national research piece to gauge awareness about workplace adjustments amongst employers and people with disabilities. Our survey revealed that 7 in 10 people haven't heard of workplace adjustments. As some of you may know, workplace adjustments can be one of the most effective tools to help people with disabilities to gain and retain employment. Another astonishing piece of data that we found was 66% of people with disabilities were not aware of workplace adjustments. If people with disabilities require adjustments at work and are unaware of these supports, it can adversely impact their decision about employment and career goals. And their absence from the talent pool means employers miss out on their potential as well. Also, only 1 in 3 people consider workplace adjustments as something easy to organize. We also found that 2 in 5 people estimate the cost of adjustments to be significant. 35% of people said discussing workplace adjustments was outside their comfort zone, while a whopping 61% were unsure or did not know how to arrange workplace adjustments to support employees with a disability. And making adjustments has a clear, wide-ranging business benefit. It can help increase the work performance of employees with a disability by providing the right tools to do their job. They can also increase the retention or productivity and committed staff who acquire a disability during their employment. It can also increase staff capability, as some adjustments can enable employers to perform tasks that they weren't able to perform before the changes were put in place. It also can help improve access to buildings and rooms by other people and customers, potentially broadening your customer base to include people with disabilities. And more importantly, it needs to become a part of the day-to-day work practice for all employees by integrating workplace adjustments into the business process rather than being just an afterthought. You can consider here the impact of COVID-19 and how many businesses move to remote and flexible working arrangements for employees. An adjustment can be made to our physical environment, workplace practices and policies, and training resources as help us improve accessibility and inclusion. So in terms of physical environments, A physical adjustments refer to any changes made to a structure, surroundings, or furniture and fittings within the workplace to remove barriers and improve access to people with disabilities. Most physical changes needed to improve access are minor, such as removing desks or installing a brighter light occasionally. A more significant adjustment may require, such as installing ramps, automatic door openers, or visual fire alarms. And I will let you know how you can access funding for these kind of modifications later on. You can also make changes into your recruitment process by making all recruitment materials available in accessible or alternative formats, such as position descriptions, applications form, and questionnaires. You can also remove medical tests or aptitude tests that are unrelated to essential jobs requirements. You can provide alternative formats of assessment test papers, for example, in audio or large print versions. You can allow candidates to present their answers using an alternative method, such as verbally rather than in writing. You can also allow candidates additional time to complete exams or selection tests, particularly for those individuals with dyslexia or other learning disorders. Organizing the interview in an accessible venue. You can provide an interpreter, for example, for a candidate who communicates using sign language. Funding may be available through the Employment Assistance Fund to organize an on-site interpreter to participate in an interview equitably. You can also make modifications by job design process. This can include flexibility with working hours, job sharing more than one person doing the job. It can be an option if employers want to work part-time rather than full-time. You can also do job carving, allocating some duties to or from another employer. And you can customize employment, simply creating a job that is more significant for a person with a significant disability. There is also training and development. This includes introducing a workplace buddy or mentoring system, allowing external support workers from specialist employers or disability services on site if necessary for orientation and learning assistance. You can also extend the training time or probation for workers with cognitive impairment or learning disabilities, or you can arrange general or specific disability awareness training for co-workers, supervisors, and managers. These are all really simple ideas that can get put in place fairly quickly, and the team at JobAccess can support you with all of these. So making adjustments in the workplace isn't costly or complicated. Internal research tells us that about 90% of all the modifications conducted by JobAccess through the Employment Assistance Fund were less than $10,000. And now 50% of them are less than $1,000. So it is not costly, nor is complicated. The Australian government's Employment Assistance Fund, or EAF, is available to people with disabilities who are about to start a job, or are currently working, or are self-employed. The EAF can buy work-related modifications and services. More importantly, JobAccess is not coercive. JobAccess is for all people with disabilities, for all employers. The person doesn't need to be connected to a DES or any other service. We know that some people that will tap into the Employment Assistance Fund only tap into the Employment Assistance Fund for the barriers to employment and don't task any other service available as well. So how do we do this? So we work with the National Panel of Assessors to conduct free workplace assessments and advice on workplace modifications and support. Again, this is at no cost at all to the individual or to the employer. Funding may be available for a wide range of supports, from adjustments or special equipment for the physical workplaces to information and communication devices and Auslan interpreting. So the EAF can also support with funding for specialist services for employees with specific learning disorders and mental health conditions. We can also organize disability-specific awareness training to support managers and colleagues on how to best interact with employees. We can also do deafness awareness training and mental health first aid training in the workplace. It is important to remember that workplace assessments and funding through the JobAccess is to help identify disability-specific solutions in the workplace. It is not to conduct an ergonomic assessment. Everyone will benefit for example, an ergonomic assessment. So it's not disability specific. As an employer, you are responsible for ensuring your staff are provided with some of the right tools to do their job as well, including the desk, chair, phone, and computer, amongst others. Research makes it clear how everyone benefits for altering their posture throughout the day, making this an ergonomic issue and not necessarily a specific disability one. Many adjustments are at low cost at all, or no cost whatsoever, as it is important putting reasonable adjustments in place. This includes flexible work hours and work from home arrangements, moving where somebody's sitting in an open plan area so they aren't distracted in terms of neurodiversity, or surprised if somebody's deaf or hard of hearing. If sitting in a high traffic area, for example, could be an elegant solution to those situations. And these flexible work arrangements can also assist other staff with their work-life balance requirements. Employers can apply for the EAF through the JobAccess website, but you can also call us on the telephone number that is in your screen now to speak with our advisors, and we will be happy to guide you through the whole process. Employers, employees, or service providers can make an application for workplace modification. For our discussion today, we will talk about the employer application process, so it is much easier to get through it. Employers can submit an online application within our website. JobAccess will assess the application and let the organization know of the outcome. If the application is successful, JobAccess will also advise if the workplace assessment is required. If a workplace assessment is not required, the organization can purchase the modification or adjustments and have the cost reimbursed by JobAccess. If a workplace assessment is needed, JobAccess will arrange a specialist, again, at no cost to you, to assess what workplace changes may be required. The assessor will visit and look at the workplace, identify any barriers that may exist, and talk with you and the employee to find solutions to make the workplace more accessible and flexible. Then your organization can purchase the modifications and have the costs reimbursed by JobAccess. A few things that I encourage you to think about before making an application. Check if the employee is eligible, and I will talk a little bit more about that in the next slide. Complete all parts of the application so we can move it quickly. Provide the required supporting documentation, and don't purchase anything until your application has been approved. But the best part of all of this is that you don't have to do it alone. We're here to help you. Your JobAccess advisor will manage the process and answer any inquiries that you may have. And the detailed guidelines of the Employer Assistance Fund are available online for you to review, should you wish to do so as well. In order to be eligible for funding to make any workplace modifications and adjustments, there are certain criteria applicants need to meet. They need to work at least 8 hours per week. If self-employed, work at least 8 hours per week as well, and an hourly income at least equivalent to the national minimum wage. Be in a job that is expected to continue for at least 13 weeks or more. Be an Australian citizen or a permanent resident. Have an ongoing disability that lasted or will last at least 2 years. And the disability must limit, restrict, or impair your ability to work. Again, our professional advisors are available to assist you with any inquiry regarding eligibility for the Employment Assistance Fund. It's also important to identify who will own the modification once the item or items have been approved. Ownership must be confirmed in writing before approval of the EAF application. It will determine who is responsible for the maintenance or repair, and what will happen to the modifications if the employee with disability changes jobs. Responsibility for ongoing maintenance, repair, or replacement of the modifications lies with the owner. when the employee changes jobs, portal of modifications should be moved with the employee. However, if the employee does not own the modifications, then the owner should ensure that the portable modification should either move with the person with a disability to the new job, or where the employee has provided, transfer the modifications to the provider to be used by another person with a disability, and is restrained in the workplace to be used by another person with similar needs. And again, our professional advisors are waiting for your call, and they can discuss all of these details with you, so you are very clear on what needs to be done. But it's not just physical modifications and adjustments in the workplace that employers can also access funding for. There is also Auslan interpreting for job interviews and related activities such as site visits, completion of tests, and information sessions for people who are deaf or have hearing impairment. There is also awareness training. This can be generic disability awareness training, deafness awareness training, and mental health awareness training. The EAF can provide up to $1,500 per year to employees for each eligible employee to conduct training and assessment. That means if it's 2 employees, it's $3,000. If it's and so on. I'm not very good with maths. Training is conducted by reputable organizations and delivered by qualified professionals with specialist expertise. The training seeks to increase awareness, reduce stigma, improve attitudes, as well as increase the confidence of employers and co-workers to assist someone who is seeking help. We also can provide specialized support here too. The EAF can provide funding for up to $1,500 per year to employers for each eligible employee to access specialist service. This support is directed at enabling a specialist to work with the employee and the employer to establish and to provide practical plans or work-based interventions aiming to meet the workplace goals and barriers. Since 2006, JobAccess has managed over 60,000 applications for workplace modifications and adjustments, and each one has made a difference. The feedback from employers we have received regarding workplace modifications that were made through the Employment Assistance Fund show us that 96% of employees were still employed 3 months after receiving the Employment Assistance funding. And 95% of employers indicated that the employees were more productive post-implementation of the workplace modifications. And 100% of employers identified that the EAF provided the help that it was intended to do. So we are doing what we're meant to be doing. JobAccess has enabled thousands of people with blindness and low vision to find work, keep work, and progress in their career. From business owners like Max Bergen, who manage his ethically run camel dairy farm, to professionals like Fiona Denmark, who works with Vic Roads, and self-employed Australians like Alistair Lee, who is an international voice artist. JobAccess provides support with tailored workplace adjustments for people from diverse backgrounds and different levels of vision loss. They're just some of many success stories. You can also visit our website to see many other stories about JobAccess improving workplace access for people with blindness and low vision. JobAccess is also delivered by about 50% of all our staff with disability. So we've got a deep understanding of how to interact with the community. Let's take a quick look at the National Disability Recruitment Coordinator, the employer engagement service of JobAccess. The NDRC partners with large employers to remove barriers in recruitment and other employment practices and give organizations a practical framework to increase disability confidence. And how do we do this? We do this by acting as a free disability recruitment advisor to employers that enter a 12-month partnership with us. We work closely with employers and focus on building their confidence and capability in disability recruitment. Specific support the NDRC provides, it's develop and disseminate job vacancies, The NDRC works with employers to identify opportunities to create job vacancies that encourage people with disabilities to apply. Works also with employers and DES providers to help them develop an ongoing relationship as a ready supply and able job candidates with disability. We also review existing recruitment practices from the candidate's perspective, checking to see if there is any inadvertent barrier preventing people with disabilities from applying for the roles. We also develop attraction strategies, reasonable adjustment policies, and internal disability awareness training packages. And we also provide ideas on how to raise awareness for the benefit of employing people with disabilities across their business. Since 2010, the NDRC has partnered with over 360 large organizations, and this includes public, private, tertiary, government, and for-profit. As I mentioned before, the JobAccess Employer Toolkit in our website is another freely available resource to support employers who are keen to employ people with disabilities in their organization. The toolkit is designed to support all levels of disability confidence in employers, no matter whether you are hiring a person with a disability for the first time or looking to take the next steps. There is appropriate information available there. It's also an extremely versatile resource, as it includes short videos, tips, and downloadable resources to support employees with a disability. This toolkit is very effective with employers and service providers, or for that matter, people with disabilities. So I really encourage you to go and have a quick look at it. The Australian government Disability Employment Service Program support people with disabilities to find and keep a job by matching them to employers. Over the years, DES have supported tens of thousands of people with disabilities to join the workforce. The primary function of the provider is a good fit to ensure that there is a nice fit in between the employer and the employee. They are there to ensure that both the employee and the employer receive the assistance necessary to address any potential disability-related issue. They also help remove potential barriers that may get in the way of satisfactory work performance. And again, while not all people with disabilities will require modifications and adjustments, it's actually really good to know that there is somebody there to support you with all of this. And it's really important for employers to really know that this service exists out there. As I said before, since our launch in 2006, in July 2006, JobAccess has become a trusted partner in the disability employment space. We have supported over 415,000 people with disabilities and employers with advice and support. JobAccess has managed more than 60,000 applications for workplace modifications and adjustments. Our employee engagement team has partnered with over 360 large organizations to build expertise and disability confidence. Since 2015, we have logged more than 15,000 complaints or reports of abuse through the CRRS and the hotline. Having supported thousands of Australians including career progressions and graduates, our teams are ready to answer your questions and provide specific advice on your specific situation. I'd like to open for questions if anybody's got any questions or comments around the Employment Assistance Fund, the services that are provided through the JobAccess program, which I know there are quite a few and it's quite a mouthful, but happy to answer anything. And again, there may be people that doesn't feel confident asking the question right now, or they don't feel that this will be the platform to raise those questions. We're happy to receive a telephone call from anybody trying to get information around disability employment.
Daniel, thank you so much for that really informative session. That was just fantastic. And we did receive some questions prior to today's presentation for you. So I will ask Cheryl to read them out to you if you're happy to respond to them.
Absolutely.
Okay, Daniel, the first question is, how long does it take from application to assessment to getting the equipment?
That will vary quite a lot, simply because we may modify a tractor that will take 6 months or a year to modify, and it will cost $200,000. But sometimes the only thing that you may need, it's an iPad, and that's something that we can move fairly quickly. So it will really much depend on the complexity of the modifications or adjustments that we're going to make. It will be also highly dependent on how quickly we can get all the evidence that we require. And you'll be happy also to know that the department is really keen on streamlining all the processes that we follow, because that was some of the feedback that, yeah, it's great to use the service operates really well. How can we make it even quicker so the employer is not waiting, so the employee, so the person with a disability doesn't risk that employment. But I can assure you that we do things very quickly. We won't take weeks or months to do something. We do it within a shorter period of time.
Okay. The second question is, if my organisation employs a person who is blind, can we start the Employee Assistance Fund, EAF, application before they commence working to speed up the process?
Absolutely. So one of the things that we like doing, if we got the assurance that the work is going to last, it's going to last for more than 13 weeks. If we got all of those assurance from employer, we can go in and prepare that workplace so the person with a disability can just enter in there with all the equipment that is required. So absolutely, we can do it for somebody that is about to start work, for somebody that is already working and their disability may be changing in terms of, it may be developing into something else. So, or for people that, that got a disability while at work. So we can come in at any single time of the job life cycle.
Okay, good. The next question is, have JobAccess encountered employer blockage for installing screen reader due to security or approval needed? How does JobAccess get around this, and how long does this approval process take?
Approval process.
Sorry, I was going to say, so I take it they're talking about maybe a government department and there's certain security to get through.
Yeah, and there are difficulties with every single thing that we do sometimes, because we deal with so many different employers and in so many settings as well. So it's very difficult to have one system that will serve everybody. That's why I think that the simplicity of JobAccess is second to none. Where for all people with disabilities, at all times of employment of the life cycle, and we will do anything to remove any barriers that they are in employment. That's our simple. That's our task that is being given to us by government. You just go and remove any barriers. So if there is blockages like that, we will obviously negotiate with employer, with the government department to see how we can speed that. Now, because we do all of those things so often, I mean, I show you the numbers, over 60,000 modifications and adjustments being done by JobAccess. We actually really know well what works and what doesn't work, and we are aware of all the technologies that are coming up, or at least the occupational therapists that are in the team in Perth. They are really aware of all the technologies and the adaptive technology that is coming through. So we are fairly nimble in the way that we work. Also, we are not a huge team; we're a much smaller team, and that means that we can be nimble, and we can really target all of our efforts on trying to get those things done very quickly.
Okay, terrific. Couple more questions, if that's okay.
That's okay.
Does JobAccess prefer the employee or the employer to put in an application for funding through the Employee Assistance Fund?
The process is basically the same,
Okay.
and the process is just as quick. So, so we kind of view this as the main person that we are meant to be serving with this service is the person with a disability. But what we are doing, we're trying to remove those barriers so the employer doesn't have an excuse not to employ that person with a disability. So we can have more exposure to people with disability at the workplaces. And I think that that's something that will start moving the needle. And again, there was a great evaluation done of the JobAccess program. It really was really positive on the work that we do. There was the only thing that it was in there was that not enough employers knew that we existed. that more awareness of these services is needed. And it is true, and that's what we're trying to do now here, and that's what the efforts of government have been for a period of time. I think that given that we had the employment roundtables a little while ago with Minister Rosten, I think that shows that at least they're thinking of how to move those needles.
Okay, I think we have 2 more questions. How do JobAccess support staff like IT who need to test new release?
Pardon, sorry, I didn't get that question.
That's all right. Hang on. How do JobAccess support staff like IT staff who need to test new release applications?
Well, we can do it in 2 ways. One, we can put on a new application and just install whatever new product is that is necessary. One thing that is also important to remember is that people do change jobs and people's disabilities do change. So at any single point, we can go back and do another assessment. So that kind of the way that we will follow it up. Now, if it is an organization that is a private organization and they need support with their IT equipment, that is where, for example, Vision Australia will come into place, and other specialized services that we can tap into also to maintain those things, to maintain the equipment.
Okay, and the last question I have is there a limit to how much equipment one person can be supplied through the Employee Assistance Fund?
There are some limitations in terms of some of that support that I was talking about before, that where you can get, for example, $1,500 per individual with a mental health condition, and that kind of can build up. In terms of equipment, there is none. We obviously still trying to utilize the best possible technology that we can find. We also try to obviously not overspend, because it's not our money, it's government money. But as I said, we've modified tractors at $200,000, where we'll provide somebody a iPad for $1,000. The interesting part about that evaluation is that it points to the fact that JobAccess is not an actually expenditure of government. JobAccess is an investment, which is very loud and clear now as a messaging to government. Because what they are doing, they're putting, let's say, $5,000 into somebody's employment, you remove that barrier, and then suddenly you've got that person working. The welfare system is not there. They've got a meaningful employment. That money gets repaid to government so quickly that it's an actual investment. So there is no limitations in terms of what we can provide. We will remove any barrier, and that barrier will be specific to the person, the type of disability that they've got, the type of employment that they do, and how they do their work. So it's really, really client-centered. So I really encourage you, if you have not gone into our website, I really encourage you to do it. If you're an employer, give it a go. We can hold your hand the whole way to get all of the modifications and adjustments that you may need. And if you're a service provider, I think that we should collectively be also marketing our services, because they're very important. And it's very important for employers to be aware that these services exist.
Daniel, again, thanks very much. And that was such an informative session, and yeah, really grateful for all the time that you gave us today. So greatly
No problem.
appreciated.
I think that Lindy's got a hand up in there. Lindy.
Bindi, what was your question for Daniel, please? Bindi, did you want to take yourself off mute? No. Perhaps, Lindy, you would be able to touch base with Daniel a little bit later if you're having trouble taking yourself off mute.
And as I said, they're all our contact details. We'll be more than happy to. That's what the service is there, to provide information. So if you've got any questions around any of that, give my team a call. They will be more than happy to answer. And we know that every person experiences disability in a completely different way. So it's very difficult to give sometimes generic questions, answers to questions, simply because you need to kind of understand what situation you are tackling and what barrier you're removing.
Cheryl, do we have any other hands up in the room at all? Not that I can see.
We don't, no, not at the moment. And just to let everyone know that this information about JobAccess will be circulated to everyone at the end of the symposium.
And by the way, Nicole and Cheryl, I usually stand up and I have a band behind me, but over the weekend I forgot my age, and I went skating with my little boy. Not a good idea. So I have to sit down.
Hope you mend quickly, Daniel. Thanks for all your time this afternoon.
No problem. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, well, moving on now, and next up we're going to hear from Bindi Maps. We're going to hear from Tony, Burrett and Cass Embling from Bindi Maps. Tony and Cass will provide information about how Bindi Maps can make indoor spaces more accessible through technology, as well as showing how people who are blind or vision impaired can navigate indoor spaces to get to their chosen destinations. So over to you, Tony and Cass. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nicole, and hi everyone. My name is Cass and I am the Customer Success Manager here at Bindi Maps. Tony, who is joining me online this afternoon, is our Chief Product Officer and also one of the founders of the company, and you'll hear from Tony very shortly. Can I just start by thanking Blind Citizens Australia for the work that you guys are doing in this space. As someone who is blind myself, I'm very familiar with the barriers that exist to finding or gaining and retaining employment. So really do appreciate the work that you're doing, particularly through the Eye to the Future program and this symposium. So yeah, thank you very much. I wanted to begin my little piece today with a short story on how I actually landed this job at Bindi Maps, because it's a bit of a different one. In 2020, I was in my final year of my university degree. I studied business at Monash. And as my graduation was looming, getting nearer and nearer, I was getting more and more nervous about how I was going to find a job. As I said, I am blind myself. So yes, very familiar with the challenges that can get in our way when finding a job. So I was getting quite nervous as crunch time was getting closer. So in that final year, I was doing all that I could to increase the likelihood that I would land a job after uni. I applied for several grad roles. I enrolled in an internship, a market research internship at Cantor Australia. And I enrolled in a subject called Build Your Career, which was all about applying for jobs and making yourself more employable and things like that. One of the assignments that we were set in that Build Your Career unit actually involved the process of finding and applying for a job, although the expectation wasn't that you would submit the application, but you had to research online to find a job that you liked the look of, write up a cover letter, tailor your resume, and then submit the assignment for marking. So while researching a job to use for my assignment, I actually came across this job at Bindi Maps. So I thought, well, I'm going to apply for both. I'm going to do my assignment and apply for this job. And win-win, I got the job and I got good marks. So that was really, really awesome. It's quite awesome, quite funny in a way that I was very aware of these barriers that exist prior to getting this job. And now I'm actually working for a business that helps break down those barriers. So for those who don't know, Bindi Maps is an indoor navigation app that works on your smartphone. And we work, Tony will go into this a little bit more than I will now, but just as a brief introduction, it works by installing Bluetooth beacons in office buildings or other indoor spaces, and then they will connect to your phone and allow you to navigate those large, complex indoor spaces such as workplaces independently and safely. So as I say, now I work for a company that's helping break down those barriers. If I saw a job advertisement tomorrow that said that, you know, we welcome people with disabilities to apply, we have Bindi Maps installed, that would say two things to me straight away. Firstly, that would tell me that, well, I'll be able to access the workplace, I'll be able to navigate around independently and quickly. And when I think about that, a particular story comes to mind straight away that I wanted to share with you all. One of our users is a very senior, well-respected public servant in Canberra. And he used to require someone, they actually employed someone specifically to guide him around to the meeting rooms in his workplace so he could meet with the people he needed to meet with and get his work done. But now the Bindi Maps is installed, he doesn't need that person anymore, and he can navigate that office totally independently and retain his, not only his independence, but also his dignity. I'm noticing also that many of our customers these days have really, not strangely named, funnily named meeting rooms that might be named after particular locations of stores, for example, or maybe they're named after products that the company sells. And while that's fun, you have no clue where to even start looking for the Parramatta meeting room. What floor is that on, what area? And Bindi Maps can remove that ambiguity for sure. The other thing that having that line in the job ad that Bindi Maps is available would tell me is that the workplace is evidently embracing diversity and inclusion. Vaughan Bennison mentioned earlier that accessibility is not only being able to physically access a building, but it's also the culture of a workplace. And I think by installing Bindi Maps, you are definitely building that kind of culture. So I will hand over now to Tony, who will talk a little bit more about how the app works and some of the features that really come into their own in a workplace. Take it away, Tony.
Thanks very much, Cass, and yeah, thank you from me as well to the BCA for letting us talk about Bindi Maps. Yeah, as Cass said, we're in a lot of locations now, and in fact, we're now the largest provider of totally accessible navigation and wayfinding in Australia. So no one else provides fully accessible navigation and wayfinding, particularly in indoor locations, in as many places as we do. And we're actually in the process of expanding. So we'll have our first European location live by this time next week. We're in New Zealand. Yeah, we're also talking to a lot of people in the United States as well. So we're very proud of the fact that we're growing fast, because the more places that have Bindi Maps, the more useful our app becomes, and the more spaces that are opened up for people who are blind or vision impaired, and also people with other accessibility needs. You know, wheelchair users, for example, can find the wheelchair route using Bindi Maps. And we're working on a bunch of other stuff as well, which will help a further range of people. So yeah, as Cass said, for our app to work, it needs to be supported, and that means that we just go around and quickly install some Bluetooth beacons in the space, and the smartphone uses the information from these beacons, as well as a bunch of other stuff, including GPS and the accelerometer and the magnetometer and various other ometers on your phone, to work out where the user is in space and their orientation, and then it lets them know the three most closest things around them to orient them in the space, and then the user can search for a destination, and Bindi Maps will guide you to that destination. And we've put, so you may think, oh, well, there's plenty of map apps around, and there's plenty of, you know, all it requires is you just find the route to the destination, and then use a screen reader to read out the information. But our experience working with many people and organisations like Guide Dogs and Vision Australia and the Royal Society for the Blind and many others is that that's not enough. That's not good enough. You know, we've put a lot of work into our into the way our app speaks to our users to try to make sure that it's chatty enough but not too chatty, and that only gives people the information that they need when they need it. So basically the way it works is you open Bindi Maps in a space that's supported, and Bindi Maps will locate you there. It'll tell you where you are, and then you can search for a destination, and it will get you there. And what this means for the workplace is, as Cass said, there are some barriers that are stripped away. So somebody who wants to go to the kitchen, particularly if it's an unfamiliar space, or they're on an unfamiliar floor, or they're coming back after a time being in isolation from COVID, for example, they can find where the photocopier is, they can find where the printer is, they can find where the meeting room is and where the bathroom is on their own, independently. So obviously, you know, that they still use their guide dog or their cane or their other aids, but Bindi Maps will get them there to the appropriate place in the workplace. And we see that as a way. There's a couple of things. The first thing is it's a signal to people. It's a signal to them to say, look, you can come here and find your way in this space, and you don't need somebody to walk with you or call somebody up and say, hey, you know, this is an unfamiliar space. Can you help me get to the bathroom or meeting room 1.4.2? So yeah, we're that's what, and we're actually finding that there's a lot of employers, major employers in Australia, who are taking this up. And I want to give a bit of a shout out to a couple of our clients who've made this major commitment for us. One of them is KPMG, who has Bindi Maps in Sydney, Melbourne, Canberra, Adelaide, Gold Coast, and Perth. So we support a total of about 28 floors of KPMG in their buildings. So if anybody on the call, you know, is really good at accounting or business consulting or management consulting, KPMG is right there. You'll be able to find the you know, there'll be no problem in finding where to get a cup of tea in the KPMG office. Similarly, EY has Bindi Maps in Adelaide, Canberra, Brisbane, and Sydney. And there's a few places, other places as well. The Department of Community Justice in Sydney, Treasury Wine Estates have also implemented us. The National Indigenous Australians Agency, Charles Perkins House in Canberra, has us, as well as a number of different other locations around the place. So, I mean, I think it's important to kind of acknowledge this, but also I think there's a wider discussion here that may be relevant for the blind, for the BCA as an association. And that is that, you know, we have a lot of rules and regulations about, you know, what's required to cater for people who are blind or vision impaired or who have other accessibility needs. There are rules around Braille in buildings, where to place tactiles. There are rules around, you know, the contrast of various building materials and whether there should be curves on the wall or not. And these things are all crucially important. They're very important. But you know, what I would say is that this technology, to be able to make these spaces universally accessible in a navigation sense, this technology is available right now, and it provides a genuine wayfinding and navigation experience for people. So if you have Braille and tactiles and you follow all the codes, follow all the building codes, what you end up with is still not a navigation and wayfinding system. It still doesn't help someone who's blind or vision impaired, who is unfamiliar with that indoor space. It still doesn't help them find the bathroom independently, or find meeting room 4.7.2, or pop in, pop out room 1.5.2. It doesn't help them. It's not really a wayfinding and navigation system. So to put this in perspective, you know, if I'm sighted, you know, then there are prominent signs around the place. You know, I can see the label on the room. I can see the bathroom sign. But that is something that's not afforded to me if I'm blind or vision impaired. But the thing is, the technology is actually available now. It can happen, and it is actually being implemented in many major buildings around Australia. And so I think, you know, my view is that it's probably time for this to start being, you know, a real access issue. You know, think about how long we've had Braille and tactiles for. They were invented a long time ago, and that's the latest technology that we are implementing in an inclusive and accessible way. That's the last time we updated what kind of technology should be used in buildings to make them fully accessible for people. You know, and it's even a case of for example, users who are in wheelchairs. You know, there may even be fully accessible wheelchair routes in buildings, but if you don't know where that route is, if it's a special lift and you don't know where that lift is, then that's an accessibility and it's an accessibility issue and a fairness issue. And so I think we need to start thinking about this, about how this works, and what we are asking of employers, what we are asking of building developers, in terms of how do we make sure that we can be as independent as possible, and so that anybody, even with a vision impairment, can find their way around independently in these large complex spaces. So and it is quite difficult. It is quite difficult. I mean, you know, the person that Cass was referring to, very senior, but the organisation was actually paying for somebody to come down and guide that person to the particular meeting room that he needed to be in. So yeah. That's kind of Bindi Maps and where we're kind of at. That's actually our passion. You know, I really think that this is actually, you know, an issue of fairness when it comes to what you can do, what you should be able to do in your workplace, and what should be available to people. And like I said, there are some leaders in the space. So there are some really great employers like KPMG, EY, and a number of others who are really taking this up, and building developers as well. There are building developers like Brookfields and a bunch of others who are actually fitting out their base building with Bindi Maps. So all their lift wells and all of that type of stuff ready for tenants to come in. And I think these people are recognizing that it's something that really needs to happen. So yeah. I hope that makes sense. Did you want to add anything else, Cass?
I only wanted to really quickly explain a couple of the features that I personally find the most useful, if that's okay. So one is that you can pin your location in the app. So I'm thinking in the workplace, I could pin my own desk, and then I can easily get back to it after my lunch break. You can also share your location. So, you know, people earlier talked about the benefit of having a permanent desk rather than hot desking if you're blind. But Tony, for example, Tony might come into the office and go and sit at a hot desk somewhere across the other side, and he could just share his location with me so that I could go over there and bug him about something if I need to. Yeah, I think that's probably the top two. Might leave it there.
Yes. Okay. So look, I hope that wasn't too much of an ad for Bindi Maps. We get a little bit passionate about what we're doing sometimes. So I'm sorry if it was too much of an ad. And the other thing I just wanted to just say was we welcome feedback from people, particularly people who are blind and vision impaired who use our app. So if anybody would like to try Bindi Maps out and see for themselves how it operates and provide us with feedback about that, we'd be very grateful. And I think Cass and I are very keen to hear any questions you might have from the group. Nicole?
Tony, Cass, thanks very much for that presentation. It was so interesting, and I'm going to download the app now and try it myself. So thanks very much. Cheryl, do we have any questions in the room for Tony or Cass from Bindi Maps?
No, I haven't received any questions.
Okay. All right. Well, again, we will make your information available to the participants for today, Tony and Cass. So if anyone does come with any questions, they'll be able to reach out and get in touch with you directly to ask questions. Thank you again for your presentation today. Greatly appreciated your time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Our last speaker before afternoon tea break today is Bryan Ruhle from Neuron. And Neuron is the leading rental e-scooter company and micro-mobility technology developer operating in cities across Australia, New Zealand, the United Kingdom and Canada. Neuron participated in BCA's internship program this year, and Bryan is here to share with you Neuron's experience in taking on an intern who is deafblind. So I'm happy to hand over to you, Bryan, to tell us all about your experience.
Thanks so much, Nicole, and thanks everyone for having us. I'm also joined by a colleague of mine in Melbourne called Marlon. But before I start, just want to acknowledge that I'm meeting on the land of the Kaurna people and pay my respects to elders past and present. Yeah, so I'm the Community Relations and Partnerships Manager for Neuron Mobility. I've been with Neuron for almost 2 years now. Prior to that, I spent quite a bit of my work life in local government and state government as a transport engineer. So with City of Adelaide, another council here in Adelaide, and then before that with RMS, which is the State Department of Main Roads in New South Wales. So as part of, I guess, what we do recognise that I guess our work, it does pose challenges to people with disabilities operating a shared mobility scheme on roads and footpaths around Australia. Obviously, the e-scooters, they do get a little bit of publicity when it comes to operating on footpaths, including parking. So we do try to work wherever possible with different community groups, particularly disability groups, and BCA has been one of those groups that we've partnered with to make sure that what we're doing is sensitive to the needs of the local community, particularly the disability community. And as part of that partnership, we have participated in BCA's Eye of the Future program, which has been absolutely fantastic for us. So we've taken on 2 interns. The main one that we'll talk about today is our intern in Perth, Ness. So she's been absolutely amazing for us. We've taken her on. She's been with us for now 5 months, I think now, Marlon. She's been absolutely amazing. So I'll sort of probably, I guess, run through the few of the dot points, and Marlon and myself will just have a bit of a general discussion about sort of what we've learned and what we've experienced and what's worked, what maybe hasn't worked quite so well, and some of those learnings. So first of all, I just want to thank the BCA team for their involvement in providing us some really high caliber referrals. So we certainly, to be perfectly honest, I don't think we were expecting the caliber of applicants that we got. We got a huge range of different experiences and expertise. To be honest, we sort of were in a bit of a frantic state at the start, trying to figure out opportunities for these participants. We had people from IT, people like Ness, who has a master's in communication, a few different experience fields. So for us, Ness was a fantastic fit obviously having that master's in communication, some really great experiences and education around the comm side of things. So we provided her an opportunity in Marlon's team, which I think I'll hand over to you, Marlon, if you want to explain what that opportunity is.
Thanks, Brian. Hi, everyone. Marlon here. So once we striked up a relationship with BCA, Brian reached out to me and mentioned that they had a really strong comms applicant named Ness. And basically, since the moment I met her, she sort of started flexing her muscles, I guess, in the writing space. And I mean, it just blew me away. You know, she's 10 times better than me at writing, and we really did need that extra support role in our team for anything email related. You know, we have a lot of push notifications via the app. We do a lot of in-app pop-ups. We have a website that always requires updating. We work with a sustainability team as well, and they're always building, you know, large documents that require a lot of proofreading. So just been so excited and so pleased to work with Ness so far. She's been a great asset. That's the sort of background, I guess, on what she does in our team as well.
Yeah. So when Ness first started with us, we were probably pretty lucky in that she already had quite a bit of the equipment and everything ready to go, really. So it was a relatively seamless fit for us. I think for us, the main issue that we probably had, so most of our communication is via a platform called Slack, which some of you may have experienced before, which is essentially, think of it sort of as an online, almost messaging kind of platform where you can participate in group chats as well as one-on-one chats and create what we call channels, which have a set topic. For instance, it might be employment in Australia, and we'll have a bunch of participants in that channel sharing photos, files, comments, and liking things. A little bit social media where you can, you know, emoji, use emojis and those sorts of things. So we use that as our primary form of communication, which Ness has taken to like a fish in water. She's absolutely nailed that. Probably the main challenge we've had has been more with when we use quite a lot of Google Docs. And obviously you have the comments section on Google Docs, which I think has caused some issues for her being able to see those comments. So yeah, there's probably some learnings there. And I think particularly for us, what we sort of found, it probably took us a bit over a month to realize this, but having the upfront conversation with Ness about her essentially how she wants to communicate and how we can communicate that to other people to talk to her. So she uses a braille board. So getting her to actually properly explain to us how that works, and then being able to explain that to our organisation. We're a multinational organisation, so we're in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, the UK, South Korea, Singapore. We're in a whole bunch of countries around the world, and we're constantly messaging each other via these Slack channels. So being able to say that we've got someone like Ness on board who's able to provide support in a whole bunch of different programs and projects, and being able to tell people the best way to actually communicate with her, because I think there was probably a little bit of misunderstanding at the start, and you know, for some people they put it in almost in a too hard basket to, you know, because they just didn't understand how to talk to her. So you know, we sort of I think put off a little bit. But once we sort of had that really upfront conversation with her and actually got her in her own language to explain it to us, which we were then able to provide through to our whole organisation, I think that really opened up the communication channels and a whole bunch of different projects. Suddenly I think we were sort of swarmed a little bit with different project managers internal to the company wanting Ness to be part of their projects. Because look, I'll be perfectly honest in saying that in the transport industry, particularly the private industry, we don't see too many people with disabilities working in this field. So being able to have someone like Ness, being able to you know, have access and get her experiences and learnings and get them involved, or get her involved in some of our projects and be able to apply some of that learning. So then, like I said before, we are more and more sensitive to the needs of people with disabilities. And obviously Ness only represents, you know, obviously herself, but being able to understand those experiences and learn from them has been extremely valuable for us, and that's certainly the feedback that we've gotten from the different project managers internal to the company.
Yeah, spot on. And like, I think the best way we've found to operate now with someone who's deaf and blind is it's really best, I would say, to with like general catch-up meetings, Zoom works really well because it allows me to write to Ness and then Ness will respond verbally to me. And that's a really nice way to sort of like take the stress off Ness from always needing to use the Braille board for basically going back and forth with me. So this takes some pressure off her. But then when it comes to briefing, it's really best to keep Zoom very top line, more just talking about your weekend, how you're going, just general chat on like, you know, how's your work life going? How's the balance happening? And then when it comes down to the briefing, we found that Slack is the best because it has archived history. And then we've also got channels as well that we can communicate on, and Ness and I can come back to them at any point that we want. Whereas with Zoom, once the conversation's over, it kind of just finishes up there without an archive. So that's probably the best kind of mixture of the two that we've found so far. And then also just all of our onboarding docs, removing imagery and any type of like larger text images, and just basically bringing everything back into a text format as well, which was a nice, I guess, kind of build in the end that helped Ness onboard further. And then whenever we get new employees joining Neuron, we do send out emails like, you know, welcome Marlon to Neuron this week. He has a background in XYZ, and that's basically where the onboarding stops. So what Bryan said is that the bios were really important, but it's not just sending a bio out to people. It's setting meetings with stakeholders that will work with Ness. And then in that way, you can kind of basically explain Ness's background, how to work best with her, which is the mixture of Slack and Zoom. And that way it made the process a lot more seamless for everybody to interact with Ness as well. Yeah.
And I think that's probably been one of the big challenges we have. We do a lot of meetings. So, like I said before, we're a large company based in many different countries. So I work entirely remotely. Marlon, you generally work entirely remotely. So for us, Zoom is sort of that face-to-face contact. We don't spend a lot of time in the offices, and Ness obviously being in Perth, where we've only got a handful of staff at the moment. You know, Zoom is a general way that we do communicate. So having those one-on-one conversations with Ness via Zoom, they're fantastic. But I think voice to text has also been pretty important for us when we've had those group chats that Ness may not be able to participate in necessarily, because you know if it's a larger meeting, you know, it's obviously worthwhile getting the interpreters. But when it's your day-to-day type meetings, it's not really feasible for us to have those interpreters involved regularly. So being able to have that voice to text, so then Ness can still get briefings of what's occurred at the meetings, as well as obviously then get the updates from us as well, I think has been pretty important.
Yeah, spot on.
Yeah. So I guess that's sort of been our learning today. Like I said before, the BCA team, they've been fantastic in providing those strong referrals. I strongly recommend, like I said before, we certainly were not expecting the type of referrals we got. So you know, for me, if I've got vacancies, there's nothing stopping me from just inquiring with the Eye to the Future team, just to see if they do have anyone who could remotely be suitable, and even then, you know, just to get, you know, an idea of, even if we've got vacancies that might be coming up next 3 to 6 months, getting an idea of who they might have. So I guess I'll just put that out there. You never know who you're going to get, so it's worthwhile just asking the question. And the team, they provide amazing support. So we've been extremely appreciative and extremely happy with how it's all gone.
Bryan and Marlon, thanks so much for joining us today, and absolutely delighted to hear that you've had such a positive experience with the Eye to the Future project and the team. And of course, in placing Ness, you were working closely with our project officer, Renee, to make sure that one got across the line. I'm just delighted to hear that you're having such a terrific experience working with Ness, and she with you also. So again, my thanks for coming along today to share your experience with us. Greatly appreciate it.